Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to WeatherBrains episode number 502 for August 31st, 2015. The final day. It's a wrap for meteorological summer. Does that make everybody happy or sad?
I'm glad to see it go.
I'm happy. Good riddance. No, this is the pre-show. This is where we share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and occasionally say outrageous things. And you know, it's not a good sign when the pre-show starts 10 minutes late. Doesn't bode well for the actual show here. So this is where we get everybody on. So let me dive into our Bill Murray email, who is the guest booking officer.
Who's going to be absent?
I should have all the information here. Let's see here. Paul is going to be one of our guests, so let's see if I can find him.
Can I go off on this Mount McKinley Denali thing?
Go!
Do these knuckleheads in Washington have nothing better to do than to sit and throw arrows at each other about what this mountain in Alaska is called? Is John Boehner, what is he doing? John, do something, please. Something productive.
Hey guys.
Knuckleheads in Washington, potential show title right there.
Oh my goodness! Why? And they sit and wonder why Donald Trump is leading the polls.
You know, that's like putting a camera on a naked guy running across a football field. Why do you want to put that in the spotlight?
Exactly. Yeah.
There are so many show titles right here. I mean, Brian, you've got a plethora of them.
I don't know if I go on with an image like that in my head.
Yeah.
Yeah, it should be bringing.
Hey, Paul, can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear us? Or can you hear me?
I can hear you, yeah.
Okay, yeah, we got Brian. James, Brian's got his iPad, and he's got Google Hangout as well, if you want to bring him on. It's Brian, and then the space, and then S, and then he's got an NTSB background as his logo.
You spell his last name?
It's just S. It's just the letter S.
On Google Plus, they used real names. I've got Brian S-O-P-E-R. That's his real name, right?
Yeah, Brian. Yeah, Brian Soper is his last name. Whatever one has the NTSB logo.
There's a whole bunch of them in there.
You have a whole bunch.
I do.
I'm seeing. Wow, there's a lot of Brian Sopers in the world.
Yeah.
Hey, can you drop his email address in the chat? And if you that's another way I could do that. Sometimes it's easier just to use his email. Typically people use a Gmail account. If you can drop that in the chat, and we are streaming live now. And
It's NTSB ATC.
Bill spelled it S-O-P-E-R.
Yeah.
I don't know if you put two O's or two P's.
NTSB ATC at
gmail.com.
Okay, so he's got the email address for it is ntsbatc@gmail.com. We don't have the chat right now. We're using our work iPads because we're on an investigation, so we don't have our other laptops.
They're on a mission. They're on a mission. No, I just invited him, and yeah, he should be in.
Yeah. All right, he should be joining momentarily, hopefully.
Okay, cool. Let's see. We are missing Nate. And welcome. We are on cable television. Welcome to those of you watching on the channel known as James Spann 24/7. It is now 1 minute after 8:30. And if we start this show, for us it's a win if we start by 35 after the hour. You know, I mean, that 5 minutes late is standard. This is the pre-show started late. And it's great having Kevin on here with a rant already about this naming thing.
Why don't you hold out for the cable company? We should get like a retransmission agreement fee for this thing on your 24/7 whatever that channel is.
So you're thinking we should charge our owners for a retransmission fee? You know, we did.
Yes, exactly.
That's not a bad idea. No, I like it. You know, we went off Dish Network, our company, for like 2 days, and they've got some temporary agreement
I have heard rumors that in some good-sized broadcasting companies that retransmission fees are now as much as 40 to 45% of total revenue.
And that's creepy because that is going away.
That's right.
Going away.
No,
And
they all, I mean, they have to know that, but they all just went and grabbed all the money, and I guess they're just going to ride that wave to the beach, but we might as well get our cut.
Hey, let's do it. Retransmission fees. I like the sound of that.
Right, so no one send in any picks of the week until we get a retrans agreement.
Exactly. We're pulling this show until we get a retransmission agreement. So let's see. Nate, who's leading the discussion since Bill's not going to show up tonight? Do you know?
I thought it was Nate.
And he's not here. In that case, I nominate John Scala to lead the discussion. All in favor? Aye.
I second that. Aye.
There we go. You're in. It's called a railroad job.
It is. I just finished my dessert.
All right.
John, hold out for a retrans.
Yeah, we got two Brians here. This is going to be a little tough. We got Brian, the guy that looks like Colonel Sanders, and Brian, the NTSB official here. So I'll warn you guys.
Shoot him, not me.
Why didn't they get you, Brian, to do the new Colonel Sanders instead of that terrible guy?
I don't know. That's a travesty.
It's
a complete travesty.
That's an
we should negotiate that deal for Brian. He should be the new Colonel Sanders. There's no doubt about that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No,
I was appalled.
That's a horrible campaign.
All right, let me get in here and get this thing started. The first thing we always do is start the recorders. So we're going to record track 1. We're going to record track number 2, and here we go. And by the way, for our guests, don't hang up on us. I'm warning Paul and Brian. I'm warning you. The first 5 minutes is going to be a rough ride. Once we clear the first 5 minutes, it's all good. I promise. It all goes up from there. Here we go.
I love how you take us right to the brink and then drop it off.
Yeah. Whoa. All right. Here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. WeatherBrains! This is the weekly show all about weather, the greatest podcast in the universe involving weather. Because we are the only podcast in the universe that does weather, I think. Hey, this is episode number 502 for August 31st, 2015. It is the end of meteorological summer, and tomorrow the first day of fall. In terms of meteorology, the astronomy guys, get their equinox here in a few weeks, but we're at the tail end of summer, and where I happen to be, and I'm in the deep south in the southern U.S., we have been below 90 for 16 consecutive days, and that is rather stunning. And yesterday, the high in my fair city was only 74, which is remarkable for August. So it has been a very pleasant month. And we'll do the weather roundup here in just a little bit. We got some action in the tropics. Very interesting hurricane deep in the eastern Atlantic. And I love any time there's a hurricane named Fred, we've got to talk about it.
Fred doesn't get any respect.
No, like everybody, there's so many jokes here. My favorite is, there's got to be one named Ethel coming up here at some point. And the problem is, there's very few people on this show old enough to remember Fred and Ethel Mertz. But anyway, in the Pacific has gone wild, and goodness, we got a lot to talk about. And but we've got Kevin Selly here, and Kevin, you're already on a rant.
Yeah, well, it's like all kinds of named rants. I wonder if we have, going back to last week's show, we could have Pickles, Hurricane Pickles. Could we do that, maybe? I like that idea.
Be careful what you wish for, Kevin.
Yeah, and I went on a rant in the pre-show about this naming of Mount McKinley to Denali, and I'm just so frustrated that our elected officials are wasting time arguing about this. Just please move on to something more important.
Amen.
Well, so Kevin, I tried to give you an image to help you move on.
No, I think that was for the pre-show audience only, since it had something to do with naked guys and dumpster fires, I think.
What? Another show title.
Wow.
We have had so many
titles all over the place. Hey, did anybody happen to check out the pickle juice thing? Website?
Pickle juice website.
Yeah, they have a website.
The product?
Yes.
Yeah. I got more traction on social media on the pickle juice thing that was going on over here than anything that I've ever put up. It turned into a local meme, and people are coming up to me on the street and asking me about pickle juice, and I just don't want to hear anything more about it.
You become the local expert. I love it.
There was some, apparently some people were seeing hashtags going by, pickled weatherman and things like that.
See, we're gonna launch your career, buddy. We're taking you to new levels with this pickle thing.
And after 25 years, I'm getting some traction.
There you go.
All for the food you can't stand.
And people are expecting a rant on the on some of the outrageous headlines. That's coming later in the show. This is a tease. If you want a good rant, hang on later for these bonehead comments about the tropical action in both basins. Both the Pacific and the Atlantic. You see the one today? Oh, brother. We'll talk about that later. We've got Brian Peters, the internationally beloved meteorologist, who is on the show this week. Brian, how are you?
I'm doing great. I've actually, this has been an August I've actually enjoyed because it's been so relatively cool, but I'm still happy to see meteorological summer in the rearview mirror.
Amen.
Yeah, no kidding. I love fall. I just love fall. You know, we talk about hating pickles. I love fall, and you get into October and November where we peak in those leaves. It is just stunning, and it is a marvelous time of the year. So I'm very excited as well. Dr. John Scala, looks like you're heating up instead of cooling down in coming days, huh?
Yeah, unfortunately, James, the atmosphere didn't get the memo. So we're looking at the next couple of days. We're at 90 here in south central Pennsylvania.
Yeah,
when the fall arrives here, it is spectacular. It is spectacular.
I'm about to say, I know it's nice up there. It is so nice. From Pennsylvania to New England, and October does not get any better. But yeah, the weather's going to do what it's going to do. It doesn't read memos or calendars or anything else. That's just the way it goes. And let's see, Rick Smith is online with us. Rick, you are where tonight?
I am in my home in Norman, Oklahoma, where it's still summer, and summer is showing no signs of leaving, despite what we say about the meteorological summer being gone. So, kind of in the same boat as John.
Yeah. Yep. And by the way, before we get off the show tonight, I want to be sure and get an update on the NWA annual meeting. And since you're in the epicenter of that, we'll get that. And look at here, Aubrey is just joining us. She said she had to reboot her computer. Have you rebooted, Aubrey?
Yes, I think so.
And again, go ahead.
Oh, am I muted?
No, you're good. You're loud and clear. You sound good, look good.
I thought I was going to be early tonight, and then, the husband's computer needed to be rebooted, or it was doing one of those updates, and...
Oh, brother. Don't get me started on Microsoft.
On a Monday? Do they not know? Come on.
Brian, what 3 words do we have for Aubrey? Get a Mac. Yes.
Well, all right. Aubrey can't afford a Mac.
Yeah. And let me just, again, up front, Aubrey, I think we should say something about our friends down the road from you, this horrible, horrible situation last week. And you actually have some connections with those that work there, right, in Roanoke?
Allison interned at our station. I knew Allison, worked with her while she was here. She actually worked with my husband because she would come in on the weekends a little bit more often, and after my husband's car accident, she would sit in the sports department with him. So he has a special connection with her, and he said that she would sit with him and, say, well, why are you doing this? What's the reason that you're doing this? And she would ask questions, and she would help him out. And she was just a phenomenal inspiration in the newsroom. She was memorable. She was. It's been difficult. It's been very difficult. One of our reporters actually just got hired at DBJ about 3 weeks ago. And actually, the morning of the incident, I saw something on Facebook and contacted him, and I'm thankful I found out from him before I found out through another outlet. But it's been tough, and it's been tough when people that are now calling it a hoax and people
please.
What?
When we have to report that, when new information comes out and we have to report it, and people are criticizing us and saying, I thought she was your friend, I thought she worked at your station, and you're saying this about her, and people don't get it. People don't understand how live shots are. It's really disheartening. But I've had a lot of comments. I've had a lot of feedback. In fact, one of our viewers, Susie, so I got a postcard in the mail from her today with some very kind words, and thank you. I know she's watching. She's a loyal WeatherBrains fan. She sends in some emails and stuff, and thank you very much for that. And one of our local police departments brought in some pie, some very good pie for us today. And the outpouring of support is appreciated. It's still unbelievable.
And to clarify, for those that maybe are new to the program, you are in Harrisonburg, which is the crow flies is how many miles from Roanoke? Not that far.
It's about an hour and 10 minutes. She graduated from James Madison University. She went to school here, which is not very far from the station she was working at. And she had interviewed at our station, and actually she had contacted my husband and I about 3 weeks ago. She was wanting to order some items from us, and we were so excited to hear from her. We were thrilled that she was going to be in the Augusta County area, which is the county south of here, and we didn't care about the order. We were just thrilled that we could see her and meet her new boyfriend, and I had seen so many pictures of him, and we were just thrilled that she had messaged us, and but she didn't allude to what she was interested in, which I wish I had kind of asked her, because I feel like at this point I could have, made it for him, or for her family. But I do plan to make something for them. But she had just messaged us a couple weeks ago, so it's, I don't know, it's still unbelievable. The JMU community is having a vigil at 6:45 Wednesday morning, which is pretty much the moment she was killed.
And I think for all of us, how many times, and especially for those of us that are older, have been doing the same thing? I mean, the exact same thing. Mm-hmm. And, people think in these live shots you have, all this security, and you have this entourage, and you have sound people and engineers. The truth is, in television today, most of the time you're out there with two people. You've got
if that.
Right, right. And you're right. Now with multimedia, with multimedia journalists, now they're just a one-man band. But in most situations, you've got a photographer and a reporter. And when you're doing a live shot, a lot of times the camera's off the tripod, especially on those morning shows. They're walking around, and the reporter's on the air, and the photog's got the camera. There's no way you can be aware of the situation. I had a situation years ago, back in the late 90s, where a guy was coming at me, and President Bill Clinton was in town. And Brian, you remember this? It was after the EF5 tornado of April 8, 1998. Yeah. This guy looked intense, and he was coming right at me. And there was a sniper on the roof of this house protecting the president, and I was just hoping he could hit the guy's leg and take him out or something. But his eyes were focused on the president, which is what he's trained to do. He was not paying attention to that. And a long story short, the guy walked in the shot, and he said some kind things. And I broke down. And I don't even know if this one's on YouTube or not. This might not be. But anyway, we've all been in that position. It took my breath away, Aubrey. And how many times have we seen these horrible, horrible tragedies? And you kind of can put it in a compartment. It's somebody else, and it's somebody else's industry. But when it happens to you and your people, it's hard to describe. So again, we offer our condolences to you, since you knew her.
And it's, for those of us that have done live shots, you are so, and can I get, like an amen, when you are doing a live shot outside, how focused you honestly are. And if you think that she saw what was going on, you have no idea what it's like to do a live shot. You might see some movement out of the peripheral vision, but you are so focused when you're doing a live shot that you're not paying attention of what's really going on around you. You're so focused, and it's hard to see pictures of your friend. You know, the Breeze, the student newspaper from the university, came out today, you know, with pictures of her and Adam on the front, and it's still, it's pictures of my friend, it's pictures of a coworker, it's pictures. It's almost as time goes on, it's more and more surreal, and I don't know. It's I don't know. I don't have words.
Yeah, it's like, you know, you're in that phase where you don't even know what to say. I've been there, and you know, as old as I am, I've been through some circumstances in my life where there's just you really don't know what to say. But again, we just wanted to let you know that we're so sorry for what happened, and we will be thinking about our friends there. You know, my Brian, our old news director, works in Roanoke now.
Yes.
He is not at that channel at WDBJ. He is at WSLS.
SLS, okay.
The other channel in town. He's the general manager. And I know that Gary offered any resources they have to them. And it was so refreshing to see all these TV stations just offering, you need a reporter, you need a photographer, you need whatever you need, we will provide that so that you can attend funerals or whatever you need to do. And, you know, we might have our disagreements from time to time, as we all do in any family, but we are a family in this business. For a lot of us, broadcasting is kind of an adopted family. I'm more of a weather guy, science guy type that came from that background, but you get into these television stations and you do get to know news people and other people that work in other parts of this building. So again, it was just a horrible thing, and I just wanted to mention that and know that you've gone through a very hard time. So thank you for being on the show tonight. Nate Johnson, let me give it to you, and I'll let you introduce our guests.
All right. Actually, I have to confess, I'm not. I know one of our guests, and I'm looking forward to meeting the other one. But we're going to talk aviation a little bit tonight. The guest that I will introduce, the guest that I'm not yet familiar with. We had originally Bill Murray was going to be on the program tonight, but had to duck out. Brian Soper is our guest. And Brian, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a bit about why you're here. And he muted that. Don't mute yourself. There we go.
All right. Figure out everything here. You have to bear with me.
There we go.
Traffic controller, so you guys all need to speak slowly and use some sign language and stuff so I can stay up with you as much as possible. For when I can't, of course, I've got Paul Suffren over here. He's my personal interpreter. That's what I tell everybody when it comes to this weather stuff. But I got asked by Paul to join y'all and talk a little bit about how the relationship between air traffic control and meteorologists. I think it's often kind of skipped over.
So that's why I didn't know you, because I recognize your voice. I've heard you on the radio a bazillion times, but never had a chance to meet you face to face. So welcome to the program. And our other guest, Paul Suffren, is a meteorologist investigator with the National Transportation Safety Board. He's one of the folks that goes out and helps investigate whenever there's some sort of an aircraft incident or accident, tries to understand whatever weather component there might be to that. And Paul, welcome to the program once again. You're a repeat guest. We didn't scare you off the first time.
No, not the first time or the second time. No, it's great to be back, and I appreciate the opportunity. So looking forward to chatting about some of the things that Brian and I are working on. So
sounds good. Well, let's jump into it. Weather obviously a big component of, first off, of any kind of flying activity. You can't fly without some weather. But let's talk a little bit about weather as an input into aviation accidents. It's one of the biggest contributing factors. Tell us a bit about the kinds of weather that get pilots in trouble and the kinds of advances that we're making to help keep that from happening.
Absolutely. I think probably the biggest percentage of weather accidents or incidents that we see in the GA community is VFR, or visual flight rules, into instrument meteorological conditions. So somebody flying along that's not used to flying in clouds or thunderstorms or anything like that, and not staying away from the weather, and they get caught in unexpected or unforecast cloud cover, whether you between 10 and 15,000 feet, they're not used to something like that. So that's the biggest percentage that we see.
And in terms of, for somebody in the cockpit flying, what's the remedy to that? First off, what should they do? Because it does happen. I mean, from time to time, what should they do?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, right there when you go instrument meteorological conditions there, you want to be well versed in paying attention to your instruments and what your instruments are saying, there in the cockpit, and trust them. And then hopefully you'll have the opportunity, you'll be talking to air traffic control at the time and asking for a report to fly into that doesn't have the worst conditions that they're at there.
So it's interesting because many folks who follow the program know that I'm working on a pilot's license. I soloed a couple of weeks ago, and this past week, the last week, I did my first time under the hood, which is the way of saying you're practicing flying by sole reference to the instruments, as opposed to most of your generally aviation flying for starter pilots. You're looking out the window and you're flying much like you would drive a car. You're not staring at the speedometer the whole time. And in this case, I'm out flying. I've got these foggles on, which sort of look like safety glasses that they've scratched up to the point where you can only see out the very bottom part of it. And you're flying along, and all you can really see are the instruments in front of you. And you've got a bunch of instruments. One, an attitude indicator, which will tell you, what direction the airplane is pointed in terms of up, down, whether you're turning or whether you're banked or not. You'll have a heading indicator and airspeed indicator, that sort of thing. And we basically spent most of the time going through all of well, if you're stupid enough to fly in a cloud, and I say stupid, but I'm talking about me. If I'm stupid enough to fly in a cloud, here's how to get her out of it. And one way they tell you to do it is just, if you're not talking to anybody, just try and turn around. You know there was clear air behind you, so do a 180 and go back to where you came. What sorts of things how does this happen, though? What are the situations where a pilot might find themselves flying from clear skies into some sort of cloud cover, be it cloud cover at altitude or even fog?
Yeah, a lot of times they're not. A lot of pilots are not getting a weather briefing before they take off, or they're getting one the night before, specifically pilot, and they don't stay on the weather conditions. So that happens in 40 to 50% of the accidents that we see. The other percentage is some kind of unforecast weather or conditions that they're not used to. Several of the accidents we've seen over the past couple of years have been pilots that do have the instrument meteorological background, but they aren't current or haven't flown or VFR and IMC accidents, 20 to folks are not getting a weather briefing before they take off, and we're not able to get that information.
So, Brian, tell us a little bit about what sorts of weather that you guys have access to, because a lot of times, pilots have access, obviously, to the weather briefings that we're supposed to get before we take off. Some pilots now, especially the more advanced aircraft, and obviously when you get into, commercial aviation, you're looking at in-cockpit weather. What sorts of weather information do you guys have at your office or in the control tower to help pilots figure out and help you guys navigate pilots through troubling skies?
Actually, that's a really good question, and actually it varies dramatically. So what we do have is access to, quite frankly, meteorologists on a pretty tight basis if we need to. So the key here is all about asking for the information. Air traffic control now it's become one of those disciplines where a lot of times if you're not asking for it, they will assume you don't need it. And I think that's one of the biggest things that pilots and those that are like yourself in the early stages need to take on board right away. So what we do have access to is essentially, depending on what type of facility you're looking at. I mean, we're looking at the standard NEXRAD, radar overlay that we have that can tell us. The one thing we don't have is people think that there may be a very descriptive, on the scope where we can tell tops and things like that. We can't tell any vertical limits. We have no vertical capacity, but we have contact with meteorologists that can get that information. So to answer the question, it's kind of tough to say what do we have available to us. We have access to almost anything, be with a phone call or an airline connection or something like that. So the key is understanding what you need, and that there's a request for assistance or help or just just information. We can get that. If it's a vague question, then you're likely to get a vague answer, unfortunately. So.
So in the case of, a pilot, let's say, student pilot just soloed a couple weeks ago, flies himself into a cloud, and then I make the call for help. And one of the things that my instructor and I went through was the checklist of the 5 C's, the things that you do if you get lost. And one of those C's is confess. That means to pop on the radio and to say, look, I'm lost, or I've flown into a cloud, something I've gotten myself into trouble and I need some help. I think one reason that people may not do that is fear of penalty. It's a natural thing. We don't want to admit that we're wrong, and we don't want to admit that we're wrong if that may hurt us down the line. Is that the kind of thing that is going to cost a pilot their certificate? I mean, obviously, if they do it over and over again, that's one thing. But if I get hung up, are you guys going to come not only get me down to the ground safely and then come arrest me when it's over?
Well, air traffic control really isn't in the arena of enforcement per se, but your perception is absolutely true. There is a perception out there that if I tell on myself on the air, then they're going to follow up with that, and now I've put myself in hot water. But when we talk about the penalty that may exist for getting yourself into a situation that you shouldn't have been in, and the penalty that can exist for not letting somebody know that you're in a situation that you're not prepared to be in, one kind of outweighs the other rather drastically. So I can't stress enough that the number one thing is absolutely right. It's time to lose the pride. If you find yourself in that situation, you have to ask. Nothing gets a controller's attention more than I need help. Okay? If you say it in some way, shape, or form like that, then a controller absolutely knows, and everything changes for that controller. Your priority changes, how they're going to handle you changes, what they know you need changes. Whereas if you beat around the bush with it, or you're very vague in the question asking, you're liable to not get the return that you need. So being straightforward is the key. Is there a fear of reprisal or a fear of enforcement? I would say certainly if you're in a situation that you really shouldn't be in, but then at that point, it'd be much better to have a learning situation that you can talk about on the ground and do whatever retraining is necessary than to go the other route. So.
And this is for both you and Paul. I've read recently that the FAA is trying, perhaps there's a sense anyway, that the FAA is perhaps bending more toward that sort of remedial training, if you will, if it's not the kind of thing where a crime has been committed in some way, shape, or form, that they tend to be more on the lines of we want to try to fix the issue rather than write a note and put it in your file or take your certificate away, that kind of thing. Is that the case? Is that just a sense that I'm getting, that maybe wishful thinking? I don't know.
I would say that certainly that's the case. As the FAA shifts to a just culture, they call it, or their SMS and stuff, that's certainly the overall thought process. I mean, it's a human thing. So if you get yourself into a situation that's not intentional or deliberate, is enforcement necessarily the best remedial action to get that person back on track or to help that not happen again? Maybe not. And maybe it's all about retraining or better training or whatever in order to bring that person back around, rather than trying to smack them and suspend them or take away a certificate or something like that. So I'd say you're exactly right that is the FAA's course, and if you talk to them, they will tell you that, and I think that it's rather true. That's not to say that there's not some old some old folks out there that'll argue that it's a little different.
Yeah. So, Paul, let's talk a little bit about the weather briefings that you mentioned early on. Pilots have access to weather briefers, folks that are paying attention to the weather and that can provide specific weather, either for flights in and around a local airport or between two airports. Tell us a little bit about what those folks are doing when they're not doing briefings, and how are they filling the time between, I've made a couple of those calls, and I call and I get a briefing, and then I hang up, and I assume that somebody else calls and talks to them as well. What kind of information do they have access to, and what kinds of things should pilots be asking for that maybe they don't know is there?
Yeah, so the pilots are able to get those briefings. One of the biggest briefing providers is from Lockheed Martin Flight Service, where, like you just mentioned, you can call 1-800 weather brief and get that weather briefing where you're talking to a live person. They have access to the standard weather charts, so the NOAA weather charts for the entire country, the air mets that are out, the SIGMETs that are out, other weather briefing information such as ceilings and tops. They can give you radar information as far as certain trends of where a squall line may be going. And of course, they'll give you all the standard text products like METAR information, TAF information there. Again, like Brian was talking about from the air traffic side, it's important to be specific. If you're going to talk to a live person there, they're going to assume that you likely have some access there at the airport or the FBO where you're taking the data down, and they're going to, just go on their little spiel about the weather. So if you, as a pilot, have a specific question on, was the TAF before that, was those thunderstorms moving quicker, is the tempo group, has it changed or anything like that in the past two forecasts or anything, or as far as the METAR information, are things trending down or trending up? All those are questions as a pilot that you would want to make sure and ask and get that information. There are a couple other sources that are official sources, such as DUAT and DUATS, and those are available, and that just comes out in a text format. So on the screen, it'll just print out all the METAR information, TAF information, and then all the weather watches and warnings, such as SIGMETs and convective outlooks there. There are a lot of apps that are out there, like 4Flight and several other companies that are doing apps that put a lot of great information out there. Unfortunately, not a lot of their data is archived, so we can't go back from the NTSB's perspective and are able to look at, what a pilot looked at as far as the weather data that they're getting. Some of those companies are starting to archive their data, so we'll be able to include that data set in our reports coming up. But a lot of the apps out there are doing some really good work in that area too. The most important thing from a safety perspective is making sure you get that weather brief from, whether it's from Lockheed Martin Flight Service, or an app or anything, and making sure that data stays archived so that we can follow up if we need to.
So let me ask you about the apps, and there's a number you mentioned, 4Flight being one, and there are a number of others. What are there different types of pilots that should probably call and talk to somebody, or different types of situations where a pilot should call and talk to somebody even if they have access to one of the DUAT or DUATs or 4Flight, that sort of thing? Is there an advantage to, in certain situations, to talking to a live human being?
Absolutely. I mean, they could, from a briefing perspective, they will have they could catch anything that you as a pilot may have missed. You may have flown this flight 10 times in the last month or something. You're getting used to flying that cross-country route, and it's just the same summer thunderstorm activity. I'm expecting the same conditions. Yeah, the METARs and TAFs look exactly the same, blah blah blah. But there may be, instead of just a normal convective outlook, today you actually have a moderate risk for thunderstorms. So it's not just going to be general popcorn thunderstorms today. We're actually expecting, rotating supercells and all that, which is a much bigger deal, especially if you're a GA pilot. Today might be a day that's much more ideal for you to stay on the ground. So from a briefing perspective, having that second opinion and that second look, and if you're feeling any kind of uncomfortableness as a pilot, making sure that you have someone else, looking at that data and giving you advice on what's going to happen is always a positive.
So speaking of other sources for weather data, the next great thing in aviation, ADS-B, and one of the features of that is in-cockpit weather for aircraft that are equipped to receive those signals. Can you and Brian tell us a little bit about what pilots should expect from an ADS-B standpoint, and maybe some, are there strengths or weaknesses of those data compared to some of the other commercially available products?
Yeah, I mean, the ADS-B data is available now for the pilots that do have that equipped in their cockpit. It streams live data on a moving map. It'll have your plane moving along with data updating in real time. So it'll have weather radar data, which is typically composite in this case. So it'll map all the radars, a regional radar image for you there. It'll load up the SIGMETs in the box, and some of them, the options are loading up lightning on there as well. Again, knowing to use this data for strategic purposes as opposed to using it for tactical is the most important thing, because we have had several pilots that have had this data equipped in their cockpits, and they've tried to use the data in a tactical sense and gotten caught in thunderstorm activity or gone VFR into IMC conditions that they were not used to there, and have led to some accidents there. So knowing to use that just for strategic purposes, and maybe today is definitely a day I need to take my alternate and head there now before the thunderstorm line gets any closer is definitely there. So ADS-B has a lot of good data, but again, knowing to use it for strategic purposes as opposed to tactical for the GA pilot is important.
So what are the limitations in the data that would make it a bad idea to use it in a tactical sense? I think the notion of having weather in the cockpit sort of lends itself to the tactical use. I'm in the cockpit, I see a storm ahead of me, and I've got the radar, fancy moving map radar display. That seems like a pretty big temptation if it sounds like the data really aren't intended to be used for that.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a temptation, absolutely. As human beings, you want to use the thing that has the prettiest colors and all that, and it seems it's shiny and new. Of course I want to use it. No, but the important thing to know, especially from the weather radar perspective there, is that the timestamp on the screen that you're seeing as a pilot is when that data image was made. It's not when the data was coming in from the weather radar. It's not the time when they're necessarily compiling all that images together. It was when it was sent to the cockpit there. And so depending on the volume coverage pattern, the VCP that the radars are running in, whether it's winter or summer, you can see some delays that are anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes that are different from the timestamp. So as a pilot, you may be seeing that thunderstorm right in front of you, but on your radar, it may be on the iPad or the ADS-B there, it may be a little bit offset. The unfortunate thing is if you're flying IMC, so if you're flying in clouds that can't see anything around you and you see this thing on your weather radar there, of course, that's the only thing that you think you can trust. If you're flying with visual flight rules and looking out there and you can see the cumulus cloud building and you can see the towering cumulus there, it's a little easier to make a decision. But if you're flying in clouds there, the weather radar is the only thing you think, and then you think, or the only thing you have available, and then you think that it's most up to date, but it's can be 5 to 15 minutes old. So it's definitely a temptation to use the new shiny stuff for things, but it's not technically designed to use for tactical purposes like in the 121 purpose where they have it in the nose cone.
So Brian, for you guys in the tower, you mentioned that you may have, depending on where you are, you may or may not have weather information. Is this going to level the playing field, as it were, to where pilots who have ADS-B and air traffic controllers will be able to look at the same weather data, or will you still be a difference?
Well, there's still a difference, and as a matter of fact, to piggyback on what Paul just said, that's one of the biggest concerns, is that as human beings, we have the tendency to believe what is most tangible to us. So if you spend a lot of money and put a nice new XM, a Garmin in your cockpit, and you have an XM subscription, and you've read up all about what it gives you and what you see, and you have a nice, pretty NEXRAD picture in there. If you're not well versed on exactly the timestamps, like what he's talking about, we see this again and again. You can end up getting yourself in some trouble. The one key with air traffic control is we're dealing with a lot less latency, okay, because we're on the ground and we're utilizing, NEXRAD feeds directly through the various processors, depending on what type of air traffic control facility you're at. But the latency is far less of an issue. What we have displayed on the scope and then what we have available to us is obviously even better. And I mean, it's quite frankly, while there can be some, I don't know whether you want to call it competition or not, when a pilot starts making a determination like, well, I'm looking at my Garmin right here, and it's showing that I'm still 30 miles away from that, and you know, and air traffic is not. That's you really got to understand. It is very key that that weather information is exactly as Paul mentioned, used for strategic purposes. It's not designed for weather penetration. It's designed for weather avoidance and planning in the initial stages. So it's all about understanding it, and that's probably, if we could get to one thing, that's the key right there, is understanding, is ADS-B going to be a great tool in the toolbox? For sure. Okay, it's great to be able to have as many tools as you can, but understanding their limitations and their pros and cons and how they work together and what complements each other, and that is really kind of key in all of that. So weather radar is very different from weather subscription via XM or whatever the case may be, different from what you might receive via ADS-B, different from what you would receive from an air traffic controller. So it's really about learning all the different ones and how to utilize them to the best of your ability. So
one of the big things we're finding on the weather side of the house, especially when it comes to warning response, getting people to take protective action when warnings are coming or warnings are issued and storms are coming, is this notion of human factors of there's psychology and communication and sociology. And one of the things that I hear both you and Paul talking about, Brian, are these human factor sorts of considerations. Things like, I want to trust the thing in front of me that's new and shiny as opposed to the guy in my ear who I have probably never met and who's looking at something that I can't tell. Talk a little bit about the role of human factors in aviation and as it relates to aviation weather. Is there anything that weather folks could learn from what you guys already know?
Uh-oh.
Everybody answer all at once.
There we go. Yeah, no, I think the as far as learning from individuals, I mean, making sure that you don't have any type of time pressure that you're going in there is definitely one of the things there. And from, I think, Brian's perspective and being able to learn from air traffic control, making sure that you voice what you're seeing on your XM weather, what you're seeing on ADS-B, and then comparing that with air traffic and taking the safest course of action there. So if the line is moving quicker than you expect or something, and then air traffic has a little bit slower, making sure you go around to the south, always take the safest course of action. So Brian, do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, speaking from a human factor standpoint, I mean, and the thing is, I guess we've just seen it so much now since I've been at the board here about a little over 4 years, I guess. And I mean, I've seen it while I was in the Navy as well. But not just the trust or reliance on what is most tangible to us, but there's kind of a misconception out there even that exists about who has the best whatever, maybe as a young pilot you toured an air traffic control facility and they showed you all the big pretty scopes and all that weather, and you go, man, they got everything here, this is great. And so your impression is from that moment on that air traffic control has the big eyes in the sky, they're going to help me out, they are never going to let me fly into that, I've seen all the stuff that's on their scopes. But understanding what they really have displayed and what they're utilizing it for is a whole another issue. And then you have the controller that thinks that the pilot, hey, the pilot's got airborne weather radar, he's got a radar in the cockpit, he has no better situational awareness or there is no better situational awareness than that person that's up there in it. So he's got better views than I do, but he doesn't understand the capabilities of that pilot or understanding how to use that equipment. So it's impossible. So what happens is those two people end up talking around each other. And it ends in a horrible situation. And when you hit the rewind button, as we have to in our job, and start piecing things back together, we find that all of the information was there. It was available. It was current. It was a matter of how to get that to the right places, and it didn't get there. So talking around each other is something that happens all the time. So as you get to these situations where you're trying to validate the weather that you're either seeing on your thing. Validate that weather with air traffic control. Give them specifics. I show myself 50 miles from that weather. Are you showing the same thing? Get the answer from them, because then they can give you, and they'll say, no, I show you about 22 miles off of that weather right now. That changes your perspective drastically. Okay, so it's all. But if you just say, yeah, I see that weather, and the controller says, yeah, okay, well, go ahead and continue. Let me know if you need to deviate. They never really validated either one what they were seeing. They just both know they have weather somewhere, and they think they've helped each other out, and they really haven't. So. I mean, we could probably go on and on, quite frankly, about human factors as it relates to weather and aviation and air traffic and all of it. But that's probably bearing on this. That's probably the main thing that we see just over and over and over, and it's a little bit frustrating.
Yeah, Brian, Paul, I wanted to just piggyback on that discussion. I do a lot of reading of airline accidents and commercial accidents. And even some private accidents. In fact, one of my favorite books is this one. It's called Aviation Disasters, and it talks an awful lot about the reconstruction of accidents and what's been found. And what I see played over and over again, even at that level, at professional level, is a litany of errors. And do you find that in the investigative work that you do, that it's not just one mistake, it's a litany of mistakes that by themselves would be perhaps inconsequential, but you line them up one after another and you have a disaster?
It actually happens all the time. Most major disasters, if you go back and when we do recreate, that's exactly what we find. You don't usually find necessarily one smoking gun that's like, oh, there it is. That was the problem right there. The thingamajig, it failed. And that's usually not it. It's usually a series of errors or mistakes or kind of a domino effect, however you want to call it. The Swiss cheese model, as everybody has heard, where the holes just kind of all line up and it allowed that stuff to pass through. We see that very often, and that's key in every aspect of it, from your maintenance, from your crews, from your pods, from your air traffic, from your weather. I mean, it exists everywhere, and it's a really hard thing to change. It's a really hard thing to get over. And especially now with technology moving at the pace that it is, right now the problem that we have is technology is outpacing the skill sets that we're giving the people that are working the stuff the ability to do. So, when I say that, I mean we have some really super technology out there, and sometimes we get in this rush to push it out there, and we don't give the full essay on how to use it, or maybe the instruction is weak, or we need to get it out there so the change quick, and so it becomes one of those things where it's almost worse than it was to not have it, when you have people that are inadequately trained to utilize what is being put out there. So it's hard to juggle. But yes, to go back to what you said, it absolutely is often a myriad of things that kind of all come together in the end, and not just one thing that sticks out there. So.
So with regards to where we're going in terms of weather in the cockpit and in aviation in general, obviously we've got ADS-B that's coming out. We're launching new satellites. Are there going to be any of the data from GOES-R, for example, that'll make it into the weather stream for pilots?
Yeah, I mean, all that new data, of course, will be updated, with new apps and things available that are there. I know from the air traffic side that they're going to be pushing out, at the moment on the scope what's available in the center. So folks that are controlling above 10,000 feet or so, they have their weather radar updates at the end of the volume coverage pattern. As far as the technology, they'll be updating after every slice. They're going to roll that out this fall. From GOES-R and the data that'll be available there, that'll be starting on. Of course, people will start streaming that into the apps and that available there. To be available to the forecasters, the Center Weather Service Unit folks that are available, the meteorologists in the center to provide support to the air traffic controllers en route. They'll have access to that data as well and be able to update, GA pilots that request that help, as well as any commercial pilots too.
So we're heading into meteorological fall, which thank God starts tomorrow. I'm ready for summer to be over, but as we head into the fall, we have to start talking about a couple of other aviation hazards, not the least of which being icing. Tell us a bit about a typical, most general aviation aircraft not equipped for icing. You don't want to get into it. What sorts of things should pilots know about icing? What do you find when you guys do investigations of accidents that have icing involved with them?
Yeah, a lot of times with our icing accidents, we again see pilots 40% of the time, 50% of the time not getting a weather briefing, so not seeing that the layers as far as what's in the forecast for icing, with between 10,000 feet and 20,000 feet. The valid air mets that are out there, a lot of times people think that, the air met's out there for moderate ice, or less. Well, if you stay in that moderate ice long enough, it's going to be an issue for your airframe. So making sure that you're updated on that information and asking for PIREPs. One of the things that Brian and I and several of our colleagues are working on right now is ways to find to increase PIREPs in the NAS and trying to get that updated there. And as we've been finding out, making sure that you request information from air traffic when you check in on frequency. Do you have any PIREPs as far as icing conditions? Where are those conditions today? And also, I'll be giving a talk at the NWA conference about some of the signals that we've been finding in the ZDR as far as icing conditions there too, which seem somewhat promising as far as to pick out areas that may have higher icing potential there. So I'll be discussing that at NWA. But again, making sure you get up weather briefing and then discussing with air traffic control as far as, do you have any information on any of the planes flying around in this sector as far as icing information?
So let's talk a little bit about your PIREP project, and I know that one of the first things we did on one of my first lessons here at Wings of Carolina was took up and they said, all right, we're going to make a PIREP, because that's what you do. You get up and you try and tell people, even though it was quiet, it was boring, there wasn't anything going on, and we called in and we told them that it was 60 some odd degrees with no turbulence and no cloud cover, and it was a beautiful day. And I know that some instructors actually will take people up, do a PIREP from the air, and then when they land, we'll go back and look at the data stream to find the report that they filed as sort of a souvenir of their flight, which I thought was kind of cool. What exactly is involved when you talk about a PIREP? Obviously, it's a pilot report of the weather. What sorts of things are you guys interested in?
Everything. Okay, so here's the thing with PIREP. And first of all, let me say I'm really glad to hear what you just said you received during your instruction, because that's something that is very rare. We're finding that how to give a PIREP and actually giving a PIREP and then to actually go back and follow up and see it come through on the data stream on how it reads on the other end. Those are huge things that we would like to see probably in the infancy of everybody's pilot training, and we don't see it in a majority of them as from what we've been looking at now. So so from that point, kudos, so you said Wings of Carolina, right? I'm thinking here for a minute, because that's actually a really big positive that a flight school is doing that. So we're kind of impressed there. But to go to talk a little bit about what you said about what we're looking for, quite frankly, PIREPs, and this is stealing a little bit of my weather guy here, of his thunder, but the bottom line is PIREPs are the single, next to airborne weather, or next to the next red radar itself, it's the single only way to validate the weather, essentially. Okay, so that's their number one weather validation. So what you just said was actually kind of a really great example, because it's something that most pilots, if you ask them, would you ever give a PIREP on a clear day when everything is just as it was forecast? And they'll say, no, I don't have any need to. It's just like it forecast. It was sunny, it was beautiful, and whatever. Well, the key to that is that the only way a meteorologist knows that from a forecasting ability is if he gets a report that it is in fact true. So So we want all of that information. The more PIREPs to feed the system, the more fidelity it gives to the forecasting models, the more fidelity it gives to the area forecasts and whatnot that are making it back to the cockpit. It's a full circle thing. There's no part of it that's immediate gratification, quite frankly, and that's the key to it all. But the bottom line is, the more you get in, the more definition you have, the more fidelity you end up in the end. And the things that pilots have trouble with, like these TAFs are always so off. They're always so backwards or whatever. They'll find that if they were to do this more, if we were able to change this culture across the NAS, both in air traffic control as well as in the pilot community, as well as with the weather community, where it was a constant flow of information to the greatest extent possible, that the accuracy of those TAFs and forecasts would increase exponentially over time as and the models would change as well. So we literally want everything. Obviously, there's key things: icing, turbulence. Those are big, huge ones that we always want, no matter what. Low-level wind shears, that type of thing. Sightings of any type of convectivity, because that's the one thing. And you mentioned earlier, and I just kind of throw that in there, from an air traffic control standpoint. When I'm looking at a radar scope, for instance, in a center or a TRACON, the weather that I have available to me on my scope is strictly precipitation and intensity levels. I have no vertical boundaries to it. I have only lateral boundaries, and I only know intensity. So all I can tell you is that you have moderate to extreme precipitation at your 12 o'clock for 20 miles. I can't tell you how high it is. I can't tell you where it starts or where it ends or begins vertically at all, and I can't tell you if there's convectivity in it unless I've had it reported to me or it's been verified through weather and they've let us know that. Okay, but it's not actually visible on the scope. So there's another area. But if you're digging and you ask the questions, we certainly have the ability to reach out to those that can get us those answers most of the time. So make the controller work. Don't be afraid of them. Excuse me.
Well, speaking of ATC, I've got a question that's always been one of interest to me, and that is, when the weather is working the way you want it to, and the aircraft are lined up and they're following their thresholds, everything is progressing the way you'd like to see it into a major hub, and then you've got a weather event taking place. How difficult is it, from an ATC perspective, to get these aircraft turned around to land on a different heading?
Well, it can be very difficult. It really depends on the airport you're talking about. Some airports now are designed really good for changing the runways. For instance, Atlanta, where we happen to be down right now, Atlanta was a well-designed airport, quite frankly, when it comes to air traffic flow, and it makes it's actually a lot easier to do a runway change here based on weather than it is at some other places. You take Chicago, for instance, it gets very hairy up there. Actually changing runways at the intersecting runways situation that they have can actually be a controller's worst nightmare. It can just be absolutely horrendous. And then you get to places like Denver and stuff like that. I mean, it can just be, it's the last thing a controller wants to do almost. It just becomes, it's very labor intensive, and immediately I just can't even explain. It's very laborsome. It can be a huge evolution. So it just varies. Quite frankly, it just varies based on the facility that we're talking about.
Hey guys, this is really fascinating. And speaking as someone who doesn't particularly enjoy flying as much as some of our other panelists, maybe this is interesting. We all saw the headlines a couple of weeks ago, or whenever it was, about the commercial airliner that flew into the hailstorm out of western Kansas or Colorado, wherever it was. I didn't personally enjoy reading all about that, but how does something like that happen? We've talked a lot about general aviation and the radar displays and the weather data that they have. How does that differ with commercial aviation? What types of information are they dealing with in a plane like that, and how do you think something like that happened?
Well, I'll tell you, it's kind of ironic you asked that question, because Paul and I are actually the two of the investigators that are actually on the Delta Hail incident investigation. As a matter of fact, we looked at the preliminary data on that, and And frankly, I mean, what I can tell you is that's the question that comes to our mind, and one of the reasons we're looking into it is, why does that happen? And why does that happen today? In 2015, how does that happen? So there's a whole lot of things that come into play, and obviously we can't speak much to the case itself because it's an ongoing investigation at this point here. But what I can say, to speak a little bit on broader terms for what you said, so air carriers or Part 121 flights, they certainly have a much different support element when it comes to weather support, weather avoidance, weather penetration, all of that. Okay, first of all, just from the planning standpoint, any major 121 carrier nowadays, they have a dispatch, and which is staffed with a number of people, which also varies based on how they're set up. But you know, a lot of them have their own meteorologists actually that literally are sitting there doing forecasting, doing weather support for all of these flights, and then they continue with that. So that dispatcher carries on half of the responsibility as they take that entire flight. So they have a dispatcher back home, wherever dispatch is, that's constantly supporting that flight with weather information and any type of hazardous weather that might come along in that aircraft's route of flight during the entire thing. That's something a GA guy doesn't have, generally speaking, right? The other thing they have is from a direct standpoint is that most Part 121 operators, air carriers like you're talking about, they're equipped with airborne weather radar, different from your actual weather subscriptions like we talked about earlier via XM radio or via ADSB and that type of thing. We're talking about actual live radar with an antenna in the nose cone, actually scanning and actually painting weather while they're airborne. The key is that it also has limitations. It's a very low power radar. It's subject to attenuation. It's not like your high power NEXRAD radar on the ground. It certainly gives them a better situational awareness airborne of upcoming and weather, but it does have its limitations like any other thing. So they too, like I said, they revert back to relying on their dispatch and going back to their dispatch for further assistance in that. But again, right down to the core elements, even we work with several pilots within our division that are actually either retired airline pilots or whatever, and quite frankly, their number one source is also another plane or pilot that's experienced the weather. So they're looking for PIREPs of other aircraft that have went through the same routes or the expected route that they're going through as their number one source of weather while they're up there from a tactical standpoint. From a strategic standpoint, I'd say that it's safe to say they rely a lot on their dispatch to do all of that legwork and provide them the best forecasting and whatnot that's available. So how does it happen? That's a great question, and that's why we still continue to investigate these incidents, because it does seem a little mind-numbing sometimes. How can that happen in 2015 when almost every passenger in the back of that aircraft can see this weather? How do they get into it? And so we get into a whole lot of things. There's just some funny things out there that don't seem to make sense. So while every passenger back there can jump on Wi-Fi and look at the latest NEXRAD picture, the cockpit is not allowed to use that Wi-Fi, for a lot of other things. So it's kind of like, wow, some people will say, gee, that don't make sense, but there's a whole lot more to it. So we battle those type of challenges every day, and that's certainly why we're going to look into this one a little deeper. So keep an eye out as we move forward with this one. I think some interesting things will come of this, and over the next several months, you'll probably see more about this Delta one and how it pans out. And as stuff becomes available, that's something we could certainly feed back to y'all too, if it's something you kind of want to see it as it goes through the process. Once that
Definitely.
stuff becomes factual,
It'd be very cool. Yeah.
We'd love to do that.
So one thing that is certainly weather related that will be changing for aviators here in about another month is the slow retirement of Flight Watch 122.0 going away. Can you tell us a little bit about how that will affect our ability to get you guys more PIREPs?
Well, it won't really affect you getting us more PIREPs, because quite frankly, you can pass that PIREP to air traffic control, but it's certainly one of the things we're looking at and one of the things we have concern about. I think taking away Flight Watch has certainly got a lot of a lot of people's attention right now as to how that's going to play out, exactly where some of those services are gonna reside once they're gone. So it's concerning, something we're looking at. When it comes to PIREPs, though, there's still other ways to get those PIREPs to us. You know, actually, pretty much anywhere you're flying, you're pretty close to air traffic control in some way, shape, or form, even if you're not in their airspace. You can pass those. You can pass them once you're on the ground. You can pass them. A PIREP, even though it may reach an age, I should say, you know, that like, well, I experienced it 40 minutes ago, and now I've landed and I've rolled out and I've texted my line. You know what? That was 40 minutes ago. It's probably not useful to them anymore, so they never say anything. Quite frankly, that's not true. I mean, it may not be the most useful one from the tactical standpoint, but it's certainly good to feed back into the weather system and the modeling that goes there. So I know it's kind of an odd thing. I don't think anybody really knows how this is going to go when it comes to Flight Watch going away. We hear it back and forth, and we don't seem to have a straight answer on that yet, exactly how that's going to play out in the long run. But still past the PIREPs. I mean, there's automated ways coming out. Some of the programs that are out there now, some of the apps allow for PIREP entry. We were just looking at one recently. What was the name of that one?
I think it was Aeroflight or something.
It's like Aeroflight or Avioflight or something like that.
We're discussing
There was definitely one that we noticed, and Lockheed Martin has their own paid-for subscription type of thing. If you actually are paying for their Spider Tracks or CSAR, you also have the ability to enter PIREPs from the cockpit that would actually go directly into the NAS. You'd actually be able, directly into the system and be spit back out. Unfortunately, what it looks like there is that's more of a proprietary system. So it's kind of, those may stay internal. They unfortunately don't feed the NAS as of right now, but they do feed the other pilots that are on that service. So there's still a multitude of ways to get a PIREP into the system, even with Flight Watch not being an availability.
I thought before we finish up, I'd just relate a quick story that follows along with the Delta Hail incident, and I'm going to avoid using names and types of aircraft to protect the guilty.
Go ahead.
I was on a research flight a number of years ago, and we were penetrating flanking cells in the high plains. And unbeknownst to us, we hit a turret that had a fair amount of ice in it, had some hailstones in it, and it took off the nose cone on the aircraft. And as we continued to spiral up and try to penetrate the anvil of the storm at about 35,000 feet, we lost our cabin pressure rather dramatically. In fact, we had condensation within the cabin itself. We lost the pressure. The oxygen mask came down, and we made a very quick descent down to the ground. And when we got out of the aircraft and walked around at the front, here's what used to be the nose cone just stripped back to the fuselage. So if you're wondering why you don't want to fly through a hailstorm, that's why.
Yep, total nightmare. All right, guys, we got to move on here. So, Brian and Paul, is there a way to get you guys? Are you like available on Twitter or social media if anybody wants to ask questions?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter. I don't think Brian is there. I'm PSSWX at that there as well, and available on Twitter there. And then we have paul.suffren at ntsb.gov and brian.soper at ntsb.gov.
Awesome.
Yeah,
well, listen, guys, thank you. Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
Kind of anti-social, unfortunately. I think Facebook is the devil, so I don't go there.
Yes.
Yeah, Kevin agrees with that. But listen, thanks. Great show. Love the topic tonight, and a lot of people have commented on social media that they've really enjoyed listening to this, especially those of our friends that are pilots or that fly or have interest in weather. So thanks for your work, and you guys keep up the great work.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you guys later.
Thanks for having us.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
And we're going to take a quick break here. We're going to come back after Professor Peters and Tony Rice with the Weather Roundup. We got the email inbox, picks of the week, and much more as WeatherBrains rolls along.
WeatherBrains 101 with Professor Peters.
In our last two episodes, we've discussed storm surge and some of the factors which play a role in shaping how big a storm surge will be. But just how vulnerable is the United States from the storm surge of a landfalling hurricane? Well, fortunately, the marvelous folks at the National Hurricane Center have employed census and geographic data to paint a picture that is somewhat sobering. The population growth for the last 20 years has been tremendous. The population density has increased 32% in Gulf coastal counties, 17% in Atlantic coastal counties, and 16% in Hawaii. It is estimated that over half of the nation's economic productivity is located within coastal zones. A storm surge of 23 feet has the ability to inundate 67% of interstates, 57% of major arterial highways, almost half of all rail miles, and virtually all major shipping hubs in the Gulf Coast area. There's a reason why meteorologists stress the need for people to heed evacuation orders along our coastline when a tropical storm is approaching. Storm surge can kill. Don't be a statistic. Heed those evacuation orders when they come. If you have a question about the weather, you can drop an email to question@weatherbrains.com.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
The planet Mercury will reach the point of greatest elongation on Thursday evening. Elongation is the measure of angular separation, or how far apart in the sky the Sun and Mercury appear to us here on Earth. I'm told there's some astrological interest here, but it can be of interest to all of us because it gives us the rare opportunity to see this elusive planet, even with the naked eye. Normally, this innermost planet is a challenge to see because that innermost position keeps it very close to the Sun. You can take advantage of that wide separation by looking to the west after sunset. Look for a bright dot, negative 1.8 magnitude in fact, which rivals many ISS passes. Elsewhere in the sky, a very long way away, the New Horizons team has announced the next target for the Grand Piano-sized spacecraft that passed Pluto last month. 2014 MU-69 is a 28-mile wide Kuiper Belt object. It's another billion miles beyond Pluto. Assuming NASA approves the extended mission, which they often do, which gets the most science for the dollar out of a still functioning spacecraft like New Horizons. The probe will reach 2014 MU-69 on New Year's Day 2019. That's your Astronomy Outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
When the weather ball is red, warmer weather is ahead. When the weather ball is white, colder weather is in sight. When the weather ball is green, no change in the weather is foreseen. When colors blink by night or day, precipitation's on the way.
Before we do the weather roundup, a reminder, we slipped in a bonus show last week. In case you missed it, we did a show exclusively on the 10th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina. We had Ken Graham, who is the meteorologist in charge of the National Weather Service in Slidell, Louisiana, and we had Dr. Keith Blackwell from the University of South Alabama. That was a really good, interesting show, so don't miss that one. And again, that was 501 after show 500 last week, so a 2-for-1 week. Weather roundup, I guess, around the continental United States, things are pretty quiet. Looks like hot weather is developing for parts of the Midwest and the Northeast, but the tropics seem to be the big story. And so these boneheads today, have you guys been watching these headlines? You know, 3 hurricanes in the Pacific. Will they ram into the United States? And of course, last week we had, what was that? The Erica.
Erica.
Deadly storm on the way to the United States 10 years after Katrina. With the implication being that it's going to be something like Katrina. And technically, yes, that was a killer storm. It killed many people in the Caribbean islands because of flooding. Technically, it was correct. But the implication was that this thing is going to be something as bad as Katrina. And we all know that Erica fizzled out. It got eaten up with the mountains of Hispaniola and wind shear, and it just wasn't meant to be. And sometimes hurricanes just weaken. In fact, even as we do this show, we have some breaking news.
We interrupt this program for a CBS Radio Net Alert Bulletin.
Fred is now a tropical storm.
Oh, there's
Wow.
But let me ask you guys, maybe somebody here knows, Fred really is a unique storm to be that organized so far east.
Oh, yeah.
Very unusual. John, you're our tropical guy, a tropical expert.
Well, this time of year is when you expect Cape Verde storms, but you don't expect them as hurricanes in the Cape Verde Islands. You expect them to organize and track to the west, but I think this is a key representation of what's happening with El Nino, how El Nino is affecting the tropical season. They just cannot maintain themselves in the central tropics. So they get organized early, they move across in the Atlantic, and they're done. They run into the shear or they run into mountains, whatever the issue is. But the subsidence that's occurring in the tropics is killing these. But that's not the case in the Pacific. Let me share an image here of the Pacific. This is absolutely amazing.
18 storms.
So many storms, you need a scorecard.
7 billion people in the path.
Exactly. Unprecedented, and it struck without warning.
When are they just going to say everyone on Earth is in the path?
That's right. I have another Katrina gripe, too. Over the weekend, I was surfing around and came across the National Geographic Channel, which I really like, and they had a 2-hour special on the 10-year anniversary. And for the first at least 20, 25 minutes of the program, I was just beside myself because they kept referring to it as she or her, as though it had, I mean, you'd have gone nuts, Nate, because not only referring to it that way, but making comments like it was somehow targeting and it had a personality that was angry and was going after, and I tagged them in a tweet, not that it'll do anything, and I certainly didn't hear from them today, but I just thought, National Geographic, in my humble opinion, that was my point too. But anyway, so there you go.
Well, let's just call them out as boneheads right here.
Boneheads at National Geographic TV. I mean, I guess I can see they're trying for a little drama, and, okay, but that just I thought was irresponsible.
The reason we The reason we avoid that kind of drama is to avoid being sexist and advancing terrible stereotypes of people. That's not good. And yet, and the thing was, there was a conversation I think we had online somewhere about whether it's a she or he or it, and I made my point that, well, the Hurricane Center names them and they call them it. That should carry some weight. And the response is, well, it's weird to call something that's named Erica it. It feels wrong. It feels like you should say. But
wasn't there research last year, and they polled these people and they gave them these scenarios, and people didn't take the storms that were named in the female names as serious as the ones that were male names.
That was one thing that came up out of all that. The second piece of it, I was doing some digging for a blog post that should go live on Digital Meteorologist sometime later this week. A little bit, not ranty, but hopefully we can turn this ship around a little bit, but of which this is one topic of 4 that I address. But when I was doing some research for that, a copy editor did some research a couple years ago and found that people were more likely to use the gendered pronouns, she, for example, with a female name storm than they were for a male name storm. So why is that? I don't know.
Because they name their car. Don't they name like their cars girl names and stuff like that? And
yeah, you start to dig into that sort of thing, and we're not trying to be sexist or racist. I don't think people intend to be that. It's just these little subtle things that sneak their way into our language that we have to be very careful about. So I
just think whatever if they take a male storm more seriously, then I don't have a problem with naming them all male storms. If that's what people are going to take more seriously, I have no beef with that. Whatever they're going to take more seriously.
Who could take Fred seriously?
I mean, might as well call it just Steve or Kermit.
Well, here in North Carolina,
like
here in
Nemo.
North Carolina, we've had to deal with a couple of F storms, Fran and Floyd. And when I think of Fran and Floyd, I think of the nanny and the barber. And yet those are two of the most destructive storms in North Carolina history happening within the last 30 years.
I hope these guys at the University of Tennessee don't send that memo down to Miami. Did you see that story?
No.
Out of the University of they're encouraging their students. If they're saying if you call somebody a he or a she, you're being a bigot. And they have this grid. And look, I am not kidding. Look up University of Tennessee gender, and there's a grid of names you're supposed to call people based on how they identify themselves, and you're a bigot by using a male or female association with a person. So we are in a really weird world. I'm just saying. And poor John was trying to show us a satellite picture like 10 minutes ago. John, I'm sorry. The floor belongs to you.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, here's
Ooh, the lights go out.
This is a Category 4 hurricane in the Eastern Pacific. This is a impressive.
Very.
That is a beast of a storm, and I hope it stays away from everyone.
Did we have three Cat 4s at one time? Is that what I saw somewhere?
I think that's right. It was Hilo, Ignacio, and Imena.
And this is happening in the Pacific, where the water is just all kind of latent energy just waiting to be released and transferred out there, right, John?
Yeah, well, the sea surface temperatures out there have been obviously anomalously warm, and it lends itself into a further discussion about what the upcoming winter will be, but we'll wait on that one.
Oh, I'd love to know right now.
I'd like all the bloggers to put out a post that says, James Spann says Pacific is boiling.
Oh, brother! Now, all the winter weather outlooks are coming out now, and of course,
it's August.
Yeah, I mean, we
enjoy summer.
No, Aubrey, we're so sick of summer, ready for it to be over, and so we have to look forward to cooler times.
These stupid Facebook posts with who's ready for pumpkins and lattes and blah 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 and leaves and
not this week.
It's July and August. I mean, jeez.
They put the Christmas stuff out in the Cracker Barrel back in July.
I saw the Halloween and Thanksgiving stuff out over a month ago.
Yeah, I drove by and saw a Halloween store that's already up and running, selling Halloween stuff here. So
I've heard that 7 billion people are in the path of fall, so we better get ready.
Exactly.
Only 7 billion?
All right. Well, we got to move on here. It's time to dig into the good old email inbox and see if anything is interesting in there.
Letters. We get letters. We get stacks and stacks of letters.
Well, now that we've talked for so long, I forget who this is from, but this came in a couple weeks ago from Kentucky something Art, I think Griffin. This is the monster storm on radar.
That's awesome.
Here is
for those that are listening, this is on the screen. This is fantastic. That is a monster in a radar echo.
He looks so friendly, though. He's smiling at you.
Yes, it's a green blob with devilish yellow eyes and a mouth, and it is a truly monster radar image of rain, and some heavy rain that is affecting likely only 5 billion people.
I think that thing looks like Shrek.
Very possible. And now I don't know how to
They're both green.
Now I don't know how to take screen share off. All right, hang on. I'm
Bingo.
slow. All right.
You're good. You're there.
Now I have to go back to the email. See, I'm a little younger than some of these guys, but I'm a little technology challenged, so. All right, now we have to go to the WeatherBrains folder. It's going to take a minute. But that came in, so that's our monster storm. And if you have an email, we'll go ahead and do this now while we're waiting for my email to connect. You can send it to email@weatherbrains.com. We appreciate your guest suggestions, your show suggestions, what you like about the show, what you don't like about the show. We're going to the More folder, and then we're going to click on WeatherBrains. And don't forget to go to weatherbrains.com and send us in your listener survey response. We also enjoy knowing where you found us. Usually it's from James Spann, but it's occasionally from another outlet. This email came in from Brian Judkis. Dear WeatherBrains, congratulations on reaching the 500 show. The show has become the highlight of my week, even though it goes out in the middle of the night for some of those of us across the pond.
Oh, you need to be reading this one with a British accent. This guy's from Britain.
I don't know if I can do a British accent. I don't know if I can do a British accent.
I'd like to hear that. Give that a try.
I could probably end up making it sound Irish.
Go for it. That's close enough. Same island.
I can't guarantee what this is going to come out sounding like.
Wait. There's some guy just entered you got breaking and entering going on.
They want me to read this email in a British accent. Since I started.
Do you know this guy?
This is my husband. Say hello.
He's never been on the show before. This is great.
He has?
Wow.
Yes, he has.
That's true. He's right. He's been on the show a long time ago.
That's her dog Bear. Don't you recognize it?
That's from Bear's Facebook page. That's the husband, Brooks. And look, he's bald like all of you guys.
Very. What do you mean, you guys?
Yeah,
Not everybody. What do you think?
Almost.
Just the cool people.
He doesn't have the hair. He doesn't have the hair like John.
John has the hair of an angel.
John has better hair than I do.
Nah, I don't.
All right, we'll finish the email.
Wait a minute. You got like 60 seconds. But better, let me just do this. I've got to play the fog bank because I got one more recorded segment. So this is Skydaver, and when Skydaver's done, I'm giving it to you guys because I got to go do some television. Ladies and gentlemen,
she can practice her accent.
Exactly. She's got the fog bank to practice. Here we go. Here's Skydaver.
Initiating startup sequence.
Hello, everyone. This is Dave Phillips. Just 4 picks this week. One of them is a bit long. The Capital Weather Gang has a report about replacing the temperature sensor in the ASOS unit at Reagan National.
That'll be right.
Earth Science Picture of the Day had a great composite photo of lightning over Central Florida in July of this year. And Nolan Deskin brings the return of the Weather Talk webinars. Nolan will be the first speaker on September 17th, describing the history of volunteer weather observations in the U.S. The October webinar will dig deep into the North American monsoon by expert Christopher Castro from the University of Arizona. November will feature Tom Niziol, the Weather Channel's winter weather expert, to tell us about lake effect snow, and it's going to get better from there. Links for all my picks are at skydaver.blogspot.com. Sometimes they're even posted on time. Thanks for listening. Skydaver out.
Initiating shutdown sequence.
All right, thanks, Skydaver. And Aubrey, if you want to finish that email, like I said, whatever accent you would like.
Since I started listening, I enjoyed hearing Josh Werman on 424, and recently Nate's colleague Greg Fischel with a very reasoned viewpoint on the climate change issue. Am I muted? Am I good?
No, you're good.
Okay.
And that's the first time that Greg Fischel's ever been called reasoned. So.
Recently, Jay Persoff's account of Joplin was a riveting account of that tragic day, and an episode I've listened to more than once. Must not forget one of the funniest one being the chaos at the start of 483.5 when the platform was playing up. That was hilarious. Regards, Brian from the UK. So thank you very much for sending in, and we got a couple of congratulations email. Also from Christopher Redmond about the Kansas Mesonet. Love the show. Keep up the good work. I tweeted you guys on Monday, one of the billion people who did, including about including the Kansas Mesonet at some point. I manage the network, and I'm focusing on expanding, improving, and the usability of the Mesonet. Would love an opportunity to spread the word. So Bill, put him in. And then Hiko Herbst. Hi, WeatherBrains. Congratulations on the 500 show. It is amazing how much work and passion you all put into this show besides your demanding jobs. It really is the best platform for interesting weather-related discussions and enhances my mind every time. I will never forget the wonderful experience I gained attending the NWA annual meeting in Birmingham in 2011. This was only possible because of the show, so thank you, especially to Bill, for all the hospitality. Kind regards from Germany.
Von Deutschland,
so thank you. Yeah. All right, so this one is from, let's see, where is this? This one is from Terry DeMercy. Listen to 499 episodes of WeatherBrains, and then there is this, guilty as charged. Just wanted to drop a note and let you guys know that I really appreciate this show. I appreciate it more knowing that you guys barely sleep and James gets up at 4:52 a.m. And he sent us some images showing some base velocity. Both are set up from KSRX Fort Smith on a day of some complex storms in August. The pot contains some healthy brown rice that Bill might like when he's not eating revolty organ meats to nauseate Jay. So thank you, Terry, for sending those in. And we got...
Oops.
Uh-oh. She said she'd been having some problems earlier. We may have lost her. Aubrey, you still there? Otherwise, we'll move on to Picks of the Week, and we'll pick up more email, although I think she was pretty much done. Picks of the Week, the segment of the show where we... Well,
and you can follow us on the Facebook and the Twitter every week.
Right.
And yeah, thank you.
That's good. All right, Picks of the Week, the part of the show where we go around the digital mahogany table and share something weather-related. It can be a website, book, article, television show, what have you. And I'll start. We've already had Skyneighbor's picks. He's always got the best ones. And I'm going to try and throw something in here. This was one shared to me by one of our flight instructors at the flying club that I'm with. It's an article from Smithsonian Air and Space talking about hurricane forecasting and the role aviation plays in trying to figure out what will cause one swirl of clouds to turn into a hurricane and what will cause the different swirl of clouds to just dissipate and fizzle out into nothing. Pretty good read there. Rick Smith, pick of the week from you, good sir.
Well, as we sit here after 10 o'clock Central Time on Fall Eve, or the meteorological autumn eve, I got a blog post that Brad Panovich did today explaining why meteorologists observe September 1st as the first day of meteorological fall versus the equinox that'll come later in the month. So I'm with everybody here. Summer can't be gone fast enough, so bring it on. We're less than 2 hours away.
I have much respect for my good friend Tony Rice, but on this one he's just wrong. Meteorological summer ends today. Fall starts tomorrow. It cannot get here soon enough. Thank you very much. Good night and God bless. John Scala, pick of the week, sir.
So is the 90 degrees that are going to be here for the next few days, is that just a figment of my imagination, or is it truly real?
It's a bad dream.
It's global warming.
Oh, right.
7 billion people in the path.
Absolutely. Well, my pick this evening is a little bit of a self-promotion, but it's the a commentary that I wrote for the Capital Weather Gang that appeared last week, entitled U.S. Coastline Vulnerability to Hurricanes is Growing to Unprecedented Levels. So we'll have that link on our website, and I ask you to take a look.
Fantastic. Thank you, sir. Brian Peters, the internationally beloved meteorologist. Do you have an internationally beloved pick of the week?
No. But I'm on a roll and a theme with Kevin because our picks are very similar. Mine is a pictorial scrapbook at the Boston Globe on the 10 years after Katrina with some before and after. And I just found it very fascinating to see how they did that. So I have to link up there.
All right. And Kevin just walked away, but his pick of the week was a similar gallery from Time magazine, if I'm not mistaken? Something along those lines.
Let's see here.
One of the big national publications.
CNN.
CNN. Okay. Well, they used to be owned by Time magazine. It's all the same thing. So, sounds good. Aubrey, pick of the week from you, ma'am.
My pick of the week, and I know this podcast is a bit male-heavy with our viewers and listeners.
I resemble that remark.
But this article, this website is about women in the Weather Bureau during World War II, and there's an intro paragraph about how they became part of the Weather Bureau, and then it goes through numerous women, and it paragraphs them kind of through their eyes as how they're telling it, and they're telling their story about how they got involved with the Weather Bureau and what it was like for them, and it's just a fascinating account.
Good stuff. I actually took a look at that, and I'm really excited to take a deeper look in the next couple of weeks. So we have, speaking of the next couple of weeks, we've got some really great shows coming up. Next week will be Labor Day. We will be hosting a program here, and it'll be a Labor Day hurricane special with Greg Nordstrom and Tom Knowles. 14th of September, we'll be talking about weather analytics, and the man with perhaps the best pipes in all of broadcast meteorology, none other than Morgan Palmer, will be joining us for that program, as well as Serena Bryda there. The 21st, Jim Digby, large venue weather safety and preparedness. That's going to be great stuff. The 28th. Yeah, that's a big topic. We've had a lot of brushes with lightning at football stadiums in just the last couple of weeks, so we're going to have to keep an eye on that. We're going to talk about that and some of the challenges that we face with that. 28th of September, Deaf Awareness Week, Trevor Boucher, and a special guest from the Storm Prediction Center, Dr. Patrick Marsh, will be joining us. Following week, Dr. Chuck Doswell will be on the program, Eli Jackson with National Weather Service, and Monday, October 19th, WeatherBrains number 508, we will be live and in vivo at the National Weather Association meeting in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, although it will not be as good as when Dr. John, Rick, and I were on the observation deck of the National Weather Center doing WeatherBrains. That was epic, gentlemen.
It'll be hard to top.
Yeah, the view will not be quite as good from wherever we are.
We'll see about that.
If you are coming to NWA, though, we are organizing something around that. We don't have the details on that just yet, where we'll be, but it's my understanding that folks will be welcome to come tag along, sort of a live audience kind of thing. So we're looking forward to having fun with that. With that, this is WeatherBrains. It's the weekly All About the Weather netcast. We do record it on Monday nights at 8:30 Central, 9:30 Eastern Time. You can watch live streaming on via Google Hangout. You can also check us out on live.bigbrainsmedia.com, and you can always find the show's podcast archived on iTunes, Stitcher, and of course, now that we're doing it on YouTube, have been for a couple hundred episodes now, you can find them all on YouTube as well, or you can just go straight to weatherbrains.com. We've got all the show notes, the picks of the week, how to get a hold of all of us crazy people on social media if you'd like. It's all there, weatherbrains.com. Certainly enjoy your hanging out with us this evening or whenever you happen to be listening to the program. Hopefully you'll join us next week. Until then, I am not James Spann. Good night, and God bless.
Thanks, guys.
Gentlemen, thank you.
Thanks,
Lady,
everybody.
gentlemen.
Good evening.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. Y'all take care. Have a good one. See y'all. Take care.
Bye, guys.
those audio files as early as possible. Most people listen to the show. The WeatherBrains is a core audio show. It's not really a video show. We do video. It goes in our digital weather channel, which is up there, but let's see. Ooh. Yeah, this is cool. So we've got the stream, WeatherBrains, and the Periscope going on here at the same time. So, wow. So, WeatherBrains, thank you. A great aviation show tonight. Love the show. Great guests. A lot of really good comments on that. So, thank you guys for watching. And if you want to join us on Periscope, check my Twitter feed, click on the link, and you will be there. We'll continue this on Periscope. And for the WeatherBrains viewers, we'll see you guys next week. Have a great week, and God bless. Bye.